Now, it's still a few weeks to go before the all-new updated Golf R is being revealed, but we're getting behind the wheel of this camouflage car to get an idea of what it's like to drive ahead of its launch. And also, this is a car that Volkswagen hopes will set a new lap record at the Nürburgring Nordschleife in order to make this the fastest Golf yet. I'm behind the wheel of the new Golf R, but not just any Golf R. This is the car that Volkswagen will use to set, hopefully, a new Nürburgring Nordschleife lap record. So, although I've got the normal seatbelt, I'm in Recaro's non-standard road car seats. I've got a roll cage in the back, and I've got the lovely Manuel beside me. The reason is this is a very special prototype, so I can't be let out unaccompanied in it, which is why Manuel is here to keep an eye on me and make sure I don't run off with their latest Golf R. Now, there are a couple of changes. We can't show you what the inside is like, but there are a couple of changes to it. You'll have to wait until our video of the world premiere debuts in June, but I can tell you they have changed a couple of things. It does still have a capacitive steering wheel, but they've changed the sensitivity, particularly on the outer panels. So what was happening before is you'd go and turn the wheel and the ball of your thumb would catch either the heated steering wheel or the R button. They've now changed it so that those areas are not as sensitive. It means you've got to press them that little bit harder. It's a bit of a halfway house. They're not going to go back to having buttons because Volkswagen says its customers, especially for the Golf R, want this slightly more advanced steering wheel. Okay, we're happy, we'll live with that, it's fine. It's a bit of a deal, it's a compromise. More importantly, the performance of this car has been tweaked. So all versions will now get the 333 horsepower output, and there's also a couple of changes to the driving modes and some of the settings that they have. There's we'll talk a little bit about that when we get through the different modes. At the moment, we're driving the car in its comfort mode. This is really what you're going to do in day-to-day driving. This car also is equipped with the Akrapovic exhaust, but at the moment it's in its quiet mode. Now, you can go through the settings of this car and change, for example, how loud you want it to be. If you want more engine sound pumped into the cabin, if you want more of the exhaust, all that kind of stuff is there as an option that you can then tailor through the infotainment system and have it set up how you want it. But in this comfort mode, well, the suspension is nice and soft, it's compliant. We are on the larger wheels, but actually it's quite comfortable. We're running on the Bridgestone tires, so these are the Potenza Race, I should say. You can also get the PS4s as well, which has always been a very popular choice among Volkswagen Golf R owners. But this is what we're running on the Bridgestones at the moment. Nice flat suspension, even though it's in a softer setting. It does feel nice, good bit of brake pedal feel as well. There has been a couple of changes to the braking system and how that works actually. So in some of the higher, more advanced settings, it uses the amount of brake pressure you're using to tell the transmission whether or not to go and do a downshift, and it knows when you're slowing down. What it can do is it can let the engine revs die down a little bit more, so you're not downshifting and you're already in the red line. So it's one of the little tweaks that they've made to the automatic transmission. And I should talk about the automatic transmission because you can only get it now as an auto. There are people that complain about the fact that this needs to be a manual. In reality, only 2% of people bought a Golf R with a manual gearbox. So although everybody says you have to do a manual, the reality is nobody bought one, so Volkswagen has said we're not going to do that anymore. Now, there are some upsides to this. The changes to the higher mode, so when you're in the sport and in the race mode, you can put this into a manual version and it will crucially stay in that manual mode. I'll talk a little bit about that when we get through it, but this is currently in its comfort mode, going over some expansion joints there, no issues at all, soaks them up very nicely. This is, after all, quite a civilized hot hatch, and even this one with its rear seats removed and roll cage, there's no real sort of reverberation and noise. It's not echoey in here. not a whole lot of road noise coming through. So it is quite civilized in that case. But of course, we've got different drive modes and we should explore them. So switch up to sport mode. The transmission automatically switches into its sport setting rather than drive, and that has the usual sort of effects that you expect to have from the sport mode. So the gears, it'll hold on to them a little bit longer. It slightly firms up the suspension setting and also adds a little bit more resistance to the steering, so you have to push a little bit harder with your steering inputs. Not a huge amount, it's quite, it's still very easy to drive. You're not having to fight against this in any way, but it just has that little bit of sportiness, and you can feel that little bit more urgency from the engine as well. The big thing Volkswagen has tried to do with this engine is to decrease the amount of lag that it has. So what it can do is it will make sure that even when you're off throttle, it will still allow a little bit of air to get into that engine rather than having everything shut off, and when you apply the throttle pedal again, it has to suck in the air and then begin pushing. It cuts out that step by allowing that little bit of air to stay in the engine. Just adds a little bit more to the responsiveness of the engine, and you can feel it as soon as you add a little bit more pressure to the right pedal. Immediately it starts to pick up. In some cases it will drop down. We're down to fourth, push a little bit harder, and it really does pull. It's a little bit more linearity in how that throttle pedal works. The torque delivery is there as well, so it is still capable of really hauling ass when you need to. And I guess that's the thing, this is still a very quick car point to point. If you want to do your track days as well, there's a lot of new features such as a GPS based track timer, so you can not necessarily have to hit the start stop every time you're going. You can set the GPS point on the track, and every time you click through that, it will start a new lap time. So it's a much more accurate way of doing your track times if that's your thing, if that's what you want to have. You've also got the usual stuff like your launch control is there as well, and they've even added quite a nifty feature. They've added a traffic light sequence, so when you select that, now we're on public roads, so I'm not going to do it now, but when you select the launch mode, you can have the option of 5 red lights appearing on the digital instrument display, and then they go out, and it will also record your reaction time as well. So if you really want to try and hone your skills, fancy yourself as a bit of an amateur racing driver, the Golf R will be able to do that for you too. But the beauty of this car is, I guess, the flexibility of it. Again, we're coming back through a town now. You can just pop into comfort mode. There's even an eco mode in this as well. So, and what that will do is it will just, again, that will switch the transmission into a specific eco setting, and it reduces the amount of fuel you're going to use, reduces therefore the amount of emissions you're going to have. Not that I know most Golf R owners probably don't care about that, but it just makes it a little bit more civilized in that respect. But of course, the race mode is the one that you're probably going to want to spend most of your time in, because that does a couple of different things. It will first of all put your transmission into the sport mode, but also then adds a little bit more reaction to it. The steering takes on a bit of a meatier feel to it as well, so you get a little bit more feel for what the front end is doing. But also, this is sort of mode where you can then access a couple of other sub menus within the race mode. So you have a drift mode and a special mode. The special mode is what you would use if you're on the Nürburgring Nordschleife. That's what they're going to have for when they go and use this particular car to try and set that new lap record. So you've got a couple of settings. You've got drift mode, which, well, let's be honest, that's pretty self-explanatory what that does. But that special mode is, as I mentioned, it is the Nürburgring setting. It's the Nordschleife. It even has the logo of the map on it. And that's really the one that you want to have, because what that does is it gives you all of the performance done to the maximum, but then sets the suspension into a softer setting. And having that kind of softer setting, it makes the car more compliant, especially over bad roads, bad surfaces. It increases the amount of traction, the amount of contact patch you're going to have with all the tires at every point on the road. And of course, this being all-wheel drive, you can also see a full torque distribution. So when you're driving straight ahead and you're not really pushing it all that hard, pretty much all the power is just going to the front wheel. But when you go to the Nürburgring or the Autobahn in this case, all that Akrapovic exhaust fully opens up its valves, gives you all the power, and you can see all that torque right now going to all four wheels. And this engine just pulls really hard. That's probably the big thing, is one of the reasons why you might want to buy a Golf R. It is that torque. And it's just so much grunt from this engine. It's only a 2-litre 4-cylinder, but this thing does shift, and with that Akrapovic exhaust, it does sound pretty decent. Now you can also, in this setting, go into the full manual mode, and unlike some transmissions, this won't drop in back to auto after 10 seconds. Once you select manual, this stays in the manual setting until you decide you've had enough and you want it to change gear itself. You've got these really nice paddles behind here. They're a decent size, but it will work just like a proper manual. And that's really, all those people that complained about this not having 3 pedals and a stick, well, this is pretty much as good as, and you don't have to take your hands off the wheel at any point. So even if you're mid-corner, you can still just keep pushing on, do your gears, and they do change every bit as quickly as you will ever need. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, this will actually drop down gear and it will hold off a few revs if it detects that your brake pressure is increased. So when you're slowing down for a corner, it's going to give you what you want when you need it. A little bit more rewarding. And it does sound great popping down the gearbox on this, especially with that exhaust. Got a few pops and bangs. It does sound pretty decent, and through the corners it really does feel nailed to the road. And that's the beauty of this thing with all-wheel drive. It just has a really planted feel. Good feeling for the brake pedal too, actually. Pretty solid, not bad. So there you go, that's our first drive in the updated Volkswagen Golf R. The whole car will be officially revealed later this year. Can't wait to show you what it looks like without any of that wrap on it. If you want to know more about this, or indeed any other Volkswagen cars, head over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. You'll find it linked in the description below, and it's a great resource for finding your next new car. Thanks for watching.